Emma sat in the dimly lit cafe, the faint hum of conversations swirling around her. It was a place she had come to often, finding comfort in the warmth of the room and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. But today, something felt different. Something in the air made her restless. She stirred her cup absent-mindedly, the spoon tapping lightly against the porcelain, producing a soft rhythmic sound that was almost hypnotic. Emma, Henry's voice interrupted her thoughts. She looked up, startled for a moment, before her gaze settled on him. He was standing there, with his usual easy smile, his dark hair slightly tousled as though it just ran his hand through it. He looked familiar, comforting even, but in a way that made her uneasy. Too familiar. In fact, sorry, I didn't mean to startle you, Hannah sighed, pulling the chair out and sitting down across from her. The soft scrape of the chair against the wooden floor echoed in the quiet of the cafe. Emma gave a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. It's fine, just lost in thought. He raised an eyebrow, noticing the faraway look in her eyes. Still thinking about him? Huh? He didn't need to specify who him was. Emma had told him about Jones, her ex, more than once. It wasn't exactly a secret. Emma hesitated before answering, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Yeah, she said softly, the name leaving her lips like an odd, familiar ache. I guess I don't know, still trying to make sense of everything. Henry leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. His expression softened, a mixture of understanding and concern. I get it. It's hard, moving on from someone like that, especially when you still have all those memories. Emma's heart gave a little lurch at the mention of Jones. She had always been haunted by the memories, the long walks they used to take, the quiet conversations that would stretch late into the night, the feeling of his hand in hers like it was meant to be. But now, those memories seemed like ghosts, shadows that hovered just out of reach, always reminding her of what she had lost. Henry's voice broke through her reverie. But you're here with me now, doesn't that mean something? Emma blinked, looking at Henry as though seeing him for the first time. He had a way of speaking that made it seem as though he was always trying to get under her skin, to find a place in her heart. But no matter how hard she tried, it wasn't the same. He wasn't Jones. She could never seem to push him far enough away to forget that. Of course it means something, she replied quickly, though her words lacked conviction. You're kind to me, Henry, and I appreciate that. I really do. But as the words left her mouth, she couldn't help but feel the growing distance between them. The connection they shared was comfortable, sure, but it wasn't the kind of fire she had once had with Jones. There was no spark, no intensity. Instead, it was more like a slow burn, steady but lacking in passion. Look, I know things with us aren't exactly perfect, Hannah said, his voice dropping a little, becoming more serious. But we can make it work. Emma, we don't have to keep living in the past. Emma's chest tightened at the mention of the past. She hadn't expected him to bring it up now, in this quiet cafe, where she had come to seek solace. She wanted to tell him that she wasn't ready, that her heart still belonged to someone else, but the words didn't come. Instead, she felt a wave of guilt washing over her. Henry was a good man. He deserved someone who could truly give him their heart. But no matter how hard she tried, her heart still belonged to Jones. I don't know, she murmured, looking down at her coffee cup, her mind whirling with conflicting emotions. Sometimes it feels like I'm just going through the motions with you, Henry, and I don't want that. I don't want to hurt you. Henry's expression darkened slightly, but he didn't pull away. Emma, you're not hurting me. I care about you. I know it's hard, but we're both here now. Isn't that worth something? Emma couldn't answer. Instead, she picked up her cup and took a slow sip, trying to hide the storm of emotions raging inside her. She was trying to convince herself that this was real, that Henry was the one who could make her forget. But she knew it wasn't true. Her thoughts always drifted back to Jones, to the life they could have had, to the love they had shared that was now gone. A sharp pang of loss shot through her chest, and she had to steady herself, afraid of breaking down in front of him. The silence between them stretched, thick and uncomfortable, as both of them seemed to retreat into their own worlds. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't think I'm ready to let go of him, Henry. I don't know if I ever will be. Henry's gaze softened, and he reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through her, but it only deepened the ache in her heart. He was kind, gentle, everything she needed in a partner, but he wasn't Jones. And maybe, just maybe, that was the problem. Then maybe it's time to let go of him, Henry said, his voice tender but firm. You can't keep living in the past, Emma. You owe it to yourself to move on, to be happy again. But as his words settled into the space between them, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was running from something she could never outrun. Henry wasn't the one who had captured her heart all those years ago, and no matter how hard she tried, she knew that deep down, she wasn't ready to move on. Not yet. Outside, the rain had begun to fall, tapping softly against the window. The rhythmic sound reminded Emma of the days when she and Jones would sit in silence, watching the rain fall, content just to be near each other. It felt like another lifetime now. She withdrew her hand from Henry's, the connection between them feeling more fragile than ever. I'm sorry, Henry, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I don't think I'm ready for this, for us. Henry didn't speak for a moment, just watching her with a look of quiet understanding. He didn't press her further, knowing that sometimes words couldn't fix what had already been broken. I'll give you the space you need, Emma, he said, his voice gentle. But I'm here when you're ready. I always will be. Emma nodded, her throat tight as she stood up, leaving behind the warmth of the cafe, stepping out into the cold, rain-soaked streets, and as she walked away, the echoes of her past followed her, whispers of a love she could never forget. Emma stood at the edge of the city park, the cold wind tussling her hair and carrying with it the scent of dampers and wet leaves. The trees, stripped of their foliage, stood like skeletal sentinels against the gray sky. Winter had come early this year, and with it, the stark realization that everything was fading. Her connection with Henry, the memories of Jones, and perhaps even her own sense of self. She hadn't expected to feel so lost, so detached. But as the days wore on, it was becoming increasingly clear that her relationship with Henry wasn't what it had seemed. Their moments together, those moments when they left, when they talked about their futures, felt empty now, hollow echoes that couldn't fill the space where her heart used to be. Henry had called her earlier, asking if she wanted to meet. She had agreed, though she knew deep down she wasn't sure why. He always tried so hard, always put in so much effort, and yet it never seemed enough. Not when her heart was stuck in the past, in a time and place she couldn't go back to. She heard footsteps crunching on the gravel behind her, and she didn't need to turn around to know who it was. She could recognize the sound of Henry's steps anywhere, steady, rhythmic, almost too careful, as if he were walking on eggshells around her. Emma, he called softly, his voice full of hope and uncertainty. You look like you're a million miles away. She turned to face him, forcing a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm here, Henry, she said, her voice full to neutral, just thinking. He studied her for a moment, his brow furrowing as he took in her distant expression. Are you okay? She nodded quickly, but the unease in her chest refused to subside. Yeah, just tired, I guess. Henry stepped closer, the warmth of his presence a stark contrast to the chill in the air. His eyes, dark and earnest, searched hers, as if trying to decode the riddle she had become. He reached out and gently took her hand, his fingers warm against her cold skin. Emma, I can feel it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I know something's off. Are we really okay? Or is it just easier for you to pretend? Emma's chest tightened at his words. She hadn't meant for him to notice, hadn't wanted him to see the cracks forming between them, but it was getting harder to hide it. It wasn't just about her lingering feelings for Jones anymore. It was about the fact that Henry, despite all his kindness, could never fill the space that Jones had once occupied in her heart. I don't know, Henry, Emma admitted, her voice trembling. I don't know what's happening with me. I just feel lost, like I'm not really here, not really with you. His face softened with concern, and he stepped closer, almost too close, as if he were afraid she might slip away entirely. Emma, you don't have to do this alone. We can figure this out together. I want to be here for you, no matter what. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But the truth was, no matter how much Henry cared, no matter how much he tried to reach her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't being fair to him. She wasn't being fair to herself, either. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Emma said softly, her voice cracking. I don't know if I'm ready for you. It's like I'm still holding on to something that isn't real anymore. Henry's face darkened slightly, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. His touch was gentle, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes that she couldn't ignore. What is it you're holding on to, Emma? He asked, his voice low and searching. Is it him, Jones? She flinched at the mention of his name, her heart tightening in her chest. I don't know, she whispered, her throat dry. It's not just him, it's everything, the way things were with him, the way we were. She shook her head, tears threatening to spill. I keep thinking about what we could have had, and I can't let go of that. Henry's grip on her face softened, and for a moment, his expression became one of deep sorrow. Emma, I wish I could be that for you. I wish I could be the one who makes you forget all of this. But you have to let go of the past before you can move forward. Emma closed her eyes, the weight of his words settling heavy on her chest. She felt as though she were drowning, caught in an ocean of memories she couldn't escape. Jones's face flashed in her mind, the way he had smiled at her, the warmth of his touch, the feeling of safety she had felt when he was around. Those were the things that haunted her, the things that made her doubt everything she had with Henry. I'm trying, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm really trying, Henry, he said softly, his thumb brushing her cheek in a gesture that was both comforting and painful. I know you are, but trying isn't enough. Emma, you need to make a choice. You can't keep living like this. She pulled back slightly, wrapping her arms around herself as though trying to shield her heart from the vulnerability that was creeping up on her. I don't know what to do. Henry, I don't know if I can love you the way you want me to. The words hung in the air between them. Heavy and final, Henry took a step back, his eyes never leaving hers. For a moment, the world seemed to still, the wind no longer biting at her skin, the trees no longer swaying. It was just the two of them, suspended in the space of a moment that felt like it might stretch on forever. You don't have to love me the way I want you to, Emma, Henry said, his voice soft but firm. But I need you to be honest with yourself. You need to be honest with me. If you're still holding on to him, if you're not ready to let go, then we need to figure out where we go from here. Emma's heart ached with the weight of his words, and she couldn't find the strength to respond. She felt torn between what she had with Henry and what she had lost with Jones. She couldn't seem to let go of the ghost of her past, but she wasn't sure if she could keep pretending that Henry wasn't enough. I don't know if I can do this, Henry, she finally whispered, her voice full of sorrow. Henry nodded slowly, his expression pained but understanding. Then maybe we need some space. Maybe we both need time to figure out what we really want. Emma felt a pang of guilt step through her chest, but she didn't say anything. There was nothing more she could say. They stood in silence for a few moments, the cold wind swirling around them, before Henry gave her a small, resigned smile. I'll be here when you're ready, Emma, he said quietly, and then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing in the park, alone with the cold wind and the echoes of love that was slowly slipping through her fingers. The city had been unusually quiet that afternoon, the streets empty and still, save for the occasional rustle of fallen leaves caught in the wind. Emma walked slowly down the familiar path toward the lake, her hands stuffed deep into the pockets of her coat. The air was crisp, the sky overcast, and everything seemed covered in a veil of gray. It was the kind of day that mirrored her mood, perfectly overcast, uncertain, and heavy with unspoken thoughts. She didn't know what had drawn her here today. Maybe it was the memory of the long walks she used to take with Jones, when they would talk for hours about anything and everything, their words drifting like the leaves in the wind. Or maybe it was just the need for space, the need to escape the suffocating weight of the questions she had been asking herself for days. She stopped at the edge of the lake, staring out at the still water. The reflection of the bare trees trembled on the surface, distorted by the occasional ripple. It seemed fitting. Her life, too, felt like a reflection, blurred, distorted, and not entirely her own. A soft, tentative voice broke the silence behind her. Emma. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Henry's voice was unmistakable, the same voice that had been calling her name in moments of concern, in moments of hope, in moments of silence. But today, hearing it didn't bring the comfort it once had. Instead, it felt like a reminder of everything she couldn't give him, of everything she couldn't let go of. Emma sighed and turned to face him. He was standing a few feet away, his hands shoved in his coat pockets, looking as out of place as she felt. The sight of him familiar, yet somehow distant, stirred something deep inside her. He looked at her with those earnest eyes, the ones that always seemed to search for a way into her heart, but she wasn't sure he would ever find it. I thought you might be here, Henry said quietly, taking a step closer. His voice was soft, almost tentative, as if he wasn't sure whether to approach her or give her space. Emma forced a small smile, but it faltered quickly. I come here sometimes. It's peaceful. Henry nodded, his gaze drifting toward the lake. For a moment, they stood in silence, the only sound the rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird in the distance. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't easy either. Emma could feel the distance between them widening, the gap between what they were and what she wished they could be. Finally, Henry broke the silence. You've been distant lately, Emma. I can feel it. We haven't talked like we used to. Emma swallowed hard, looking down at her feet. She wanted to tell him everything, the truth about how she still thought of Jones, how she couldn't seem to let go of the past, how she felt like she was stuck in a life that wasn't really hers. But the words were stuck in her throat, buried beneath layers of guilt and confusion. I've been thinking, she said slowly, her voice barely a whisper, about us, about everything. Henry took another step forward, his eyes narrowing with concern. What do you mean? Emma hesitated. She had rehearsed this conversation in her mind so many times, but now that it was happening, the words seemed to elude her. I don't know if I'm the person you think I am, she said faintly, her voice shaky. I don't know if I can be what you want me to be. Henry's expression faltered for a moment, as if the weight of her words had hit him harder than he expected. Emma, I don't want you to be someone else. I just want you to be you. But you've been so distant lately. I don't know what's going on with you. Emma closed her eyes, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She had tried so hard to be present for Henry, to give him the kind of love he deserved, but every time she reached for it, her hand seemed to grasp at nothing but a shadow, a memory that was always just out of reach. I don't know if I can love you the way you need me to, she admitted, her voice cracking under the weight of the truth. I keep thinking about Jones, about what we had, and no matter how hard I try, I can't seem to let him go. There was a long pause, and when she opened her eyes, she saw the hurt in Henry's face. He didn't speak right away. as if he were processing what she had said. When he finally did, his voice was low, almost too quiet. Emma, I know it's hard. I know it's not easy to let go of someone who meant so much to you. But you can't keep holding on to him. You're here, with me. You have to decide if you're ready to let go of the past, or if you want to stay stuck in it. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had heard them before, from people who cared about her, from people who thought they knew what was best for her. But the truth was, she wasn't sure she could ever truly let go of Jones. How could she, when everything about her life seemed to be a pale imitation of what she had once had? Henry was good to her. He was kind, thoughtful, and patient. But he wasn't Jones. And no matter how much she tried to convince herself that it was enough, it never felt like it. I don't know if I can, she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. I don't know if I can love you the way you deserve. Henry's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, she saw something in them that made her chest ache. He wasn't angry. He wasn't resentful. He was just tired. Tired of waiting for something that might never come. Tired of holding on to hope that seemed to slip further and further away with every passing day. I don't want to be the person who holds you back, Emma, he said quietly. But I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when I know it's not. You're not really here with me, are you? She shook her head, unable to speak. Her throat was tight, and the tears she had been holding back threatened to spill over. She had been so afraid of this moment, so afraid of the day when Henry would realize that she couldn't give him what he wanted. But now that it was happening, she felt numb, like she was watching someone else's life unfold before her. Maybe it's time we stop pretending, Henry said, his voice calm but final. Maybe it's time we both face the truth. You're still holding on to him, and I'm still here, hoping for something that isn't going to happen. Emma looked up at him, her heart breaking all over again. I'm sorry, Henry. I never wanted to hurt you. I know you didn't, he replied softly. But sometimes, love isn't enough, and sometimes, you have to let go. There was a long silence as they stood there, the wind picking up around them, swirling the dead leaves across the path. Emma's heart felt as if it were being torn into, each part of her fighting against the other. She wanted to hold on to Henry, to make things right, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always going to stand in the way. I think we need some time apart, Henry said, his voice gentle but firm. Maybe we both need to figure out what we really want. Emma nodded slowly, unable to find the words to express the depth of the regret she felt, as Henry turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone by the lake. The silence enveloped her once more, and this time, it felt like the end of something that had never truly begun. The lake before her seemed to stretch on forever, the ripples on the surface no longer mirroring the reflection of the trees, but the reflection of a life she couldn't quite reach. The days after Henry's departure were some of the quietest Emma had ever experienced. It wasn't the kind of silence that provided comfort, but rather a void heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to follow her everywhere. She had tried to keep busy, filling her hours with work, but nothing seemed to fill the empty spaces inside her. The apartment felt too big now, too cold. She would come home after long days of meetings and sit in the silence, staring at the walls, the ticking of the clock the only sound in the room. The loneliness was suffocating. The absence of Henry's voice, his laughter, the warmth he had brought into her life, had left a gaping hole that she wasn't sure how to fill. Today, she found herself walking again to the same park near the lake, her mind consumed by the conversation she had had with Henry. It seemed to replay in her mind constantly, like a broken record, the words echoing in her thoughts. Maybe it's time we stop pretending. You're still holding on to him. I can't keep waiting for something that isn't going to happen. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words pressed down on her chest. The park was quieter than usual, the trees bare and skeletal in the cold winter air. The sky overhead was a dull, oppressive gray, mirroring her mood. Emma pulled her coat tighter around her body as she walked along the winding path, her boots crunching on the frost-covered ground. She was numb to the cold, numb to everything, except the gnawing ache in her chest. It was then that she saw him standing by the lake, just a few yards away. The sight of him hit her like a punch to the gut. She stopped dead in her tracks, her heart racing, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't expected to see him again, not this soon. It had been days, almost a week, since their last conversation, and she had hoped, at least for a moment, that their paths wouldn't cross again. Jones, he stood with his back to her, looking out at the still water, his posture careful but somehow distant, even from behind. She could tell he was lost in his thoughts, his shoulders slightly slumped, as if he to carry the weight that was too heavy for him to bear. Emma's heart thudded in her chest, and for a moment, she wasn't sure if she should approach him. She had tried to forget him, to move on, but seeing him here of all places was like a cruel reminder of what she had lost. She had no right to feel this way. She had made her choice, had ended things with him for a reason. She was with Henry now, wasn't she? But the ache in her chest didn't care about her rationalizations. It didn't care about Henry. All it cared about was the man standing before her, the man who had once meant everything to her. She took a tentative step forward, and then another, until she was standing just a few feet behind him. Jones didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge her presence. It was as if he hadn't heard her approach at all. "Jones," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The sound of her voice seemed to startle him, and he stiffened, his shoulders tensing as he slowly turned to face her. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke, the silence between them stretching out like an eternity. His eyes, dark and intense, met hers, and in that instant, everything seemed to rush back to her. The memories, the feelings, the way his presence had always made her feel like she was home. "Emma," he said, his voice low, but there was an unmistakable softness to it, a trace of something that lingered between them. "What are you doing here?" Emma swallowed hard, her throat dry. I was just walking. I didn't expect to see you." He gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. "I come here sometimes. It's quiet." She nodded, unsure of what to say next. The truth was, she had no idea why she had come here today. She had no explanation for why she was standing in front of him. After everything that had happened, "How are you?" he asked, his eyes searching hers, as if he were trying to understand what had happened in the time they had been apart. "I'm fine," Emma replied, the lie slipping easily from her lips. She wasn't fine. She wasn't even close. But she didn't know how to explain it. She didn't know how to explain the mess that had become her life, how she had let everything slip away. "Are you really?" Jones asked, his voice almost too gentle, too knowing. He took a small step forward, closing the distance between them, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't look fine." Emma looked away, staring down at the ground. The weight of his gaze was too much, too overwhelming. "It's just complicated." Jones tilted his head slightly, as if trying to figure out whether she was being honest with him. "Complicated how?" he asked, his voice soft but insistent. Emma took a deep breath, her chest tightening as she tried to find the words. She wanted to tell him everything, the truth about Henry, about how she felt like she was drawing in a life that wasn't hers, about how she had never stopped thinking about him, about how she was still holding on to the ghost of their past. But the words wouldn't come. "I don't know what I want anymore," she said finally, her voice trembling. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. Henry's been trying, and I've been trying too, but it doesn't feel right. And I keep thinking about you, about what we had. And I can't move on. I can't let it go." Jones didn't say anything at first. He simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he stepped even closer, until they were almost touching. "Emma," he said, his voice low, "you can't keep doing this to yourself." "I don't know how to stop," she whispered, her throat tight. "I don't know how to stop loving you." Jones's face softened, a flicker of something deep in his eyes, something that made Emma's heart skip a beat. He reached out slowly, almost hesitantly, as though unsure if she would pull away. When she didn't, he gently cupped her face in his hands, his touch warm and familiar. "You need to let go of the past, Emma," he said softly. "You need to let go of me." Her breath caught in her throat, and she felt a tear slip down her cheek. "I don't know how," she whispered. "I know," Jones replied, his voice full of quiet sorrow. "But you can't keep holding on to something that's already gone." Emma closed her eyes, the tears flowing freely now, the weight of his words crushing her. She had always known the truth, but hearing him say it aloud made it more real, more painful than she had ever imagined. "Maybe I can't," she whispered, her voice breaking, "but I don't know how to move forward without you." Jones gently wiped away her tear with his thumb, his eyes softening as he looked at her one last time. "You'll find a way," he said, his voice filled with a quiet certainty. "You'll find your way." For a moment, they stood there, holding each other in a silent embrace, the world around them fading into the background. And though Emma knew deep down that they could never go back, she couldn't shake the feeling that, for just a brief moment, everything had felt right again. But reality quickly settled back in. She pulled away, her chest heavy, and wiped her eyes. "I need to go," she said, her voice small. "I need to figure things out." Jones nodded, his face calm but his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite read. "Take care of yourself, Emma. You deserve to be happy." With one last look at him, Emma turned and walked away, her heart aching with the weight of everything she had left behind. The days that followed her encounter with Jones were marked by a deep, gnawing silence that consumed Emma. Every corner of her apartment seemed to echo with the absence of the past that had always felt so close, so real, and yet, now felt so distant. She kept herself busy, focusing on work, trying to occupy her mind. But it was no use. The memories, the feelings she had long buried, had risen to the surface again, and she was trapped in the chaos of her own heart. Today was no different. She had spent the morning at her desk, staring at the same email draft for over an hour, her mind drifting to places she couldn't control. The conversation with Henry replayed in her mind constantly, like a broken record. And then, there was Jones. His face had haunted her since their meeting by the lake. He had been so close, so tender, and yet, so far away. She couldn't understand why she felt the way she did. why her heart was still tethered to him, even after everything had ended. At noon, she found herself walking again through the city streets, her steps mechanical, her mind numb. The wind beat at her cheeks. The chill of the late autumn air matching the cold emptiness inside her. She passed by the cafe she and Hannah used to visit often, the place that had once been a haven for their conversations and shared laughter. Now, it only reminded her of the gaping hole in her life. She didn't even know where she was going, but somehow, her feet led her to the same park near the lake where she had seen Jones days ago. She had hoped she wouldn't run into him again, but deep down, she knew that part of her was still searching for him. The park was quieter than usual. The trees bare and stretched up to a sky that seemed just as empty as she felt. She walked along the path, each step feeling heavier than the last. She passed the bench where she and Henry had once sat, their hands intertwined, their future bright in their eyes. Now, the bench seemed foreign, a relic of a life she wasn't sure she could ever return to. As she approached the lake, her heart skipped a beat. There, standing by the water, was Henry. He was looking out at the still surface, his hands in his pockets, his posture rigid. He had always had a way of standing, as if he were trying to hold the weight of the world on his shoulders. Emma hesitated for a moment, her pulse quickening, before taking a tentative step forward. "Henry," she called, her voice softer than she intended. Henry didn't turn around immediately. He stood still, his body tense, as though he had been waiting for her to approach. When he finally did turn to face her, his expression was unreadable, a mixture of hurt, frustration, and something else that she couldn't quite place. "Emma," he said, his voice cold, almost distant. "I didn't think I'd see you here." Emma felt a pain in her chest at the emotion in his voice. It wasn't the warmth she had once known. It was the voice of someone who had been burned, someone who had been left standing in the ashes. She took a small step forward, her eyes searching his. "I didn't expect to see you either," she replied, her voice faltering. "But I've been thinking about everything." Henry's eyes narrowed slightly, a frown tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I don't know what there is left to talk about, Emma. We've said everything we needed to say." She took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremble in her hands. "Henry, you don't have to say it," he interrupted, his tone sharp. "I know, you're still thinking about him, still holding on to the past. I can't be a part of that." Emma, the words hit her like a slap to the face, sharp and stinging. She had known this moment was coming, had been waiting for it. But hearing it out loud, from his lips, was like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. "I'm not trying to hold on to anything," she sighed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just confused. I don't know what I want anymore." Henry's gaze softened, but there was still a bitterness beneath it. "You can't keep living in the past, Emma. You got to choose. You can't keep stringing me along while you're still in love with him." Emma flinched at his words, and for the first time, she saw the rawness in his eyes, the disappointment, the hurt. She had seen it in his face before, but now, it was undeniable. She had failed him, and she wasn't sure how to fix it. "I never wanted to hurt you," she sighed, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to make you feel like you weren't enough. But I know," Hannah said, cutting her off again. "But the truth is, Emma, I can't keep waiting for you to decide what you want. I can't keep pretending like things are okay when I know they're not." Emma felt her chest tighten, and the tears she had been fighting to hold back finally spilled over. "I don't know what to do," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to let go of him." Henry took a step back, his eyes not leaving hers. "Maybe it's time you figured that out. Maybe it's time we both did." The words hung between them, heavy and final. Emma felt as though the ground beneath her was shifting, threatening to swallow her whole. She had always believed in love, had always believed that it could conquer anything. But now, standing here with Henry, she realized that sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes, it was too late. "Henry, please," she said, her voice breaking, "don't leave me." He looked at her, his expression softening for just a moment, and she saw the conflict in his eyes. But then, the softness faded, replaced by something harder, something she couldn't bear to look at. "I think it's time we both moved on, Emma," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I need to let go of this. I need to let go of you." Her heart shattered as the finality of his words hit her. She took a shaky step back, the cold air biting at her skin. But it wasn't the wind that made her feel numb. It was the realization that Henry was right. She had held onto him, to the past, for far too long, and now, it was too late to fix it. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely able to get the words out. "I'm so sorry." Henry turned away from her, his figure growing smaller as he walked away, leaving Emma standing alone by the lake. The wind howled around her, the chill seeping into her bones. But she barely felt it. She felt as if the world had stopped moving, as if time had frozen in that moment, and she was stuck in a place she could never escape. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She had lost both of them. She had lost Jones, and now she had lost Henry, and she was left alone, with nothing but the remnants of a life she couldn't rebuild. With a final, shaky breath, she turned and walked away, the sound of her footsteps the only thing she could hear in the vast emptiness of the park. Emma stood in front of her apartment building, the familiar structure looming over her like a prison. Her heart was a storm of emotions: guilt, sadness, confusion, but most of all, she felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness. The conversation with Hannah earlier today had been the final nail in the coffin of what had once been a relationship full of promise. She had never wanted things to end like this, but it seemed like she was incapable of making the right choice. As she ascended the stairs to her apartment, she could feel the weight of each step pressing down on her. The apartment felt empty without Henry's presence. It felt even emptier now that he had told her, in no uncertain terms, that he couldn't keep waiting for her. He had begged her to choose him on the past, and she hadn't chosen him. She opened the door and stepped inside, the silence of her home swallowing her whole. She barely registered the soft click of the door behind her, her eyes wandering around the space she had once shared with him. The couch they had sat on for movie nights, the kitchen where they had cooked dinner together, the bedroom they had both vowed to make their sanctuary. Everything felt so far removed from the life they had once dreamed of. Emma dropped her bag on the floor, feeling the weight of the emptiness settle in her chest. She moved mechanically, going through the motions of her evening routine. She didn't know why she bothered. None of it mattered anymore. The past few days had been a blur of work, distractions, and restless sleep. And yet, despite everything, the one thing that lingered in her mind, refusing to let go, was Jones. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sharp ping of a message notification on her phone. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw that it was from him. "Jones, are you okay?" Emma stared at the message, her finger hovering over the keyboard. It had been days since they had seen each other, since that moment by the lake when they had shared words that should have given her clarity. But instead, they had only deepened her confusion. She knew she should ignore the message. She had told herself that she needed to move on, that chasing after the past would only bring her more pain. But a part of her knew, a part of her heart that she couldn't silence, wanted to hear from him, wanted to know if there was still a chance, however small, for them. "Emma, I don't know what to feel anymore." She sent the message before she could second guess herself. Almost immediately, her phone buzzed again. "Jones, I know things are complicated. I don't want to make it harder for you." Emma let out a shaky breath, feeling the familiar ache in her chest. She thought about Henry, and the way he had looked at her today, the disappointment etched in his features. She thought about what he had said, how he couldn't keep waiting for her to choose between him and the past. "Emma, it's too late for me to fix anything. I've already hurt too many people." There was a long pause before Jones replied. "Jones, you don't have to fix anything. I just want you to be honest with yourself." The words stung, but they also gave her a small sense of relief. For the first time in days, she felt like someone understood. He wasn't asking her to make a decision, not to promise anything. He just wanted her to be honest. "Emma, I don't know who I am anymore." She wasn't sure why she had sent that message. Maybe it was because the words had been on the tip of her tongue for so long, begging to be spoken aloud. Maybe it was because, deep down, she knew that the person she had been, the person who had been in love with Henry, the person who had once been happy, was slipping away. She sat down on the couch, her legs trembling as she waited for Jones's response. A part of her didn't want to hear it. A part of her wanted to keep running, to keep hiding from the truth. But she knew, deep down, that she couldn't keep running forever. Finally, her phone buzzed again. "Jones, I know you're struggling, but you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here, always." Tears blurred Emma's vision as she read the message. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that, despite everything that had happened between them, there could be a way back to the life they had once shared. But reality kept intruding, reminding her of all the reasons they couldn't be together. "Emma, I don't know how to move forward." She typed the words slowly, each one feeling heavier than the last. The truth was, she didn't know how to move forward. She had always thought that time would heal her wounds, that with enough distance, she would be able to figure things out. But the pain both from losing Henry and from losing Jones was still raw, and she didn't know how to make it stop. She received another message, and this time, there was no hesitation in his words. "Jones, you don't have to figure it out alone. You can talk to me. I'm not going anywhere." Emma closed her eyes, resting her head against the back of the couch. She felt the weight of his words settle into her heart. It was a lifeline, but it was also a trap. She knew that, even if she let him in, it wouldn't fix the mess she had made of her life. She had already lost so much. She took a shaky breath and typed, her hands trembling, "Emma, I can't keep doing this to myself. I need to find a way to let go of the past." She wasn't sure if she was talking to Jones or to herself. The truth was, she didn't know how to let go. She didn't know how to stop loving the people who had once been her entire world. And she didn't know how to move on from the ghosts of the past that haunted her every waking moment. Her phone buzzed again, and she opened her eyes to read his reply. "Jones, letting go takes time. It's okay to be lost right now. You don't have to have it all figured out." His words were simple, but they carried a weight of understanding that Emma wasn't sure she was ready to accept. He was right, of course. Letting go wasn't something that could happen overnight. But that didn't make the process any less painful. She sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the screen, trying to process everything. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that somehow she could move forward. But she knew it wasn't that simple. The past clung to her like a shadow, and every step she took forward seemed to be a step away from the people she had once loved. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a call. Jones's name appeared on the screen. She hesitated for a moment, then swiped to answer. Emma. Jones's voice came through the speaker, warm and comforting, but with a trace of uncertainty. You still there? I'm here, she replied, her voice soft. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. You don't have to know, he said gently. Take it one step at a time. We'll figure it out together. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Emma allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. She didn't have to fix everything by herself. Maybe, with time, she could find a way to heal. Emma hadn't been able to sleep for the past few nights. Her mind wouldn't stop, the thoughts swirling around like a storm she couldn't escape. The walls of her apartment felt like they were closing in, and each passing hour seemed to stretch on forever, suffocating her in the silence. The past was hunting her, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't outrun it. The conversation with Jones lingered in her thoughts. His voice, so steady and reassuring, had made her feel for a moment that things could be different, that maybe, with time, she could heal. But deep down, Emma knew the truth. Healing didn't come easily, not when the wounds ran as deep as hers. It was early Saturday morning, and the city outside her window was just beginning to wake up. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden hue over the buildings. Emma sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, her eyes unfocused as she stared out the window. It was the same view she had looked at every day for the past 2 years, but today, it felt unfamiliar. Her phone buzzed, and Emma glanced down. A message from Jones. She hadn't expected it, but there it was, sitting on her screen, waiting for her. Jones, I'm thinking about you. How are you holding up? Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, she wasn't sure how to respond. Was she holding up? Was she really? She had spent so much time pretending everything was fine, but the truth was, she didn't know how to move forward. She didn't know how to move past the fragments of her past that were still tethered to her every thought. Emma, I'm not sure anymore. Everything feels broken. She hesitated before sending the message, the words feeling too raw, too honest. She wasn't used to letting people see her so vulnerable, not even Jones. But the weight of her feelings had become too heavy to carry alone. Almost instantly, her phone buzzed again. Jones, I understand. I know things are complicated, and I don't want to push you, but I'm here if you need to talk. Emma stared at the screen, her chest tightening as the words sunk in. She didn't want to burden him, but she needed someone to talk to. Henry had been the one person she thought would always be there, but now he was gone, and the only person left was Jones, the man who had once been her everything, but who had also become a distant memory. Emma, I don't know how to move on. How do you let go of someone you love so much? It was a question that had been gnawing at her for weeks now. How could she let go of Henry, of the life they had planned together? How could she let go of Jones, even though the weight of their past was too much to bear? She didn't expect a quick response, but within moments, Jones's name flashed on her screen again. Jones, letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting that things change, even if you don't want them to. I know it's hard, but you can't hold on to something that isn't meant to be anymore. Emma felt a lump form in her throat as she read his words. He was right, but it didn't make it any easier. Letting go was never meant to be easy. It was something she had spent her entire life avoiding, and now, it was her only option. Emma, but what if I can't accept it? What if I can't move on? There was a long pause, and Emma began to wonder if he had already left the conversation, if he had moved on with his life while she was still stuck in the past. But then, the phone buzzed again. Jones, I won't lie to you, Emma, it won't be easy, but you won't be alone, not if you don't want to be. Emma's hands shook as she clutched the phone, the words sinking deep into her heart. She didn't want to be alone. She had never wanted to be alone. She had always believed in love, in the promise that someone would always be there, no matter what. But now, all she had was the uncertainty of the future that seemed to be slipping away faster than she could grasp it. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment as the weight of everything pressed down on her. She had never felt more lost. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Emma blinked, confused, her heart skipping a beat. She hadn't been expecting anyone. She stood up and moved toward the door, her pulse quickening with each step. Who could it be? When she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Standing there, framed in the doorway, was Henry. He was wearing a dark jacket, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. His eyes, the same eyes that had once filled her with so much warmth, were now filled with something else, something that she couldn't quite place. Henry, she whispered, the word escaping her lips before she could stop it. He nodded, his gaze steady. Can we talk? Emma swallowed hard, her emotions rising to the surface. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to show up at her door, not after everything that had happened. But here he was, standing in front of her, looking as lost as she felt. She stepped aside, allowing him to enter. As soon as he did, the silence between them grew thick. The air charged with unspoken words. Henry looked around the apartment, his gaze landing on the small table where they had shared so many meals. The memories were still fresh in her mind, the late-night dinners, the quiet mornings, the way they had fit together so perfectly. "Why are you here?" Emma finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Henry hesitated, then looked directly at her. "I came to apologize for what I said, for pushing you away when you needed me most." Emma felt a pain in her chest at his words. She had known this moment was coming, but hearing it, hearing the rawness in his voice, made it all the more real. "I didn't want to hurt you, Emma," he continued. "I thought I was doing the right thing, giving you space. But I realize now that I've only made things worse. I'll push you away when what you really needed was someone to stand by your side." She felt tears break her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You didn't pull me away. I pushed you away." Henry stepped closer to her, his voice gentle. "No, you were lost, and I didn't know how to help. I thought you needed time. But maybe you just needed someone to remind you that you're not alone." The sincerity in his voice broke through Emma's defenses. She had tried so hard to hold everything together, to make sense of the mess she had created. But standing here with Henry, she realized how much she had wanted him to fight for her. She had wanted him to care enough to come back, to make things right. "I don't know if I can ever fix this," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to move forward, how to let go of the past." Henry reached out, taking her hand in his. The warmth of his touch sending a shiver down her spine. "You don't have to fix everything, Emma. We can take it one day at a time, together." The simplicity of his words, the kindness in his eyes, made her feel something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for them. Maybe they could find their way back to each other. But then, the weight of everything else hit her. Jones, her feelings for him. Her heart was torn between the man who had once been her everything and the man who was offering her a second chance. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered, her heart aching with the truth. Henry's expression softened. "I know, but I'm here, whenever you are." And as he stood there, holding her hand, Emma realized that for the first time in months, she wasn't completely alone. She had a choice to make, and though she didn't know how it would end, she knew that, whatever happened, she would have to face it head on. The past couldn't hold her back forever. It was time to step into the future. The rain had come out of nowhere. It was early evening, and the sky, once clear and serene, had been overtaken by dark clouds that seemed to be spilling their sorrow onto the streets below. The pattern of the rain against her window was rhythmic, almost hypnotic, and for a moment, Emma felt like she could disappear into it. The world outside was as fragmented as her own heart, drifting, lost, uncertain. She sat on the edge of her bed, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her apartment, usually filled with the hum of life, now felt suffocatingly quiet. The air was thick with memories, the weight of every conversation, every decision, and every missed opportunity pressing down on her chest. She wasn't sure when it had all gone wrong, but she knew she couldn't keep living in this state of limbo, torn between the past and the present. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table, jolting her out of her thoughts. She didn't need to check to know who it was. Jones's name appeared on the screen, the simple message glowing under the dim light of her lamp. "Jones, we need to talk." Emma stared at the message for a long moment, her heart rate picking up. She had been expecting this. She knew there was no avoiding the inevitable conversation that had been building between them for days, but that didn't mean she was ready for it. She had been avoiding the truth for so long, clinging to the hope that things would somehow resolve themselves. But deep down, she knew that wasn't going to happen. With a shaky breath, she picked up her phone and typed back, "Emma, I know, I'll meet you in 20 minutes. She hesitated before hitting send, her fingers hovering over the screen as the reality of the situation settled in. She didn't know what she was expecting from this conversation. Closure, understanding, maybe even forgiveness, but whatever it was, she wasn't sure she was ready for it. But she had to face it. She had to stop running. 20 minutes later, Emma stood outside the small cafe they had chosen to meet at. The rain had only intensified, and the streets were slick with water. Her shoes splashed through the puddles as she made her way to the entrance, where she spotted Jones sitting by the window, his face partially obscured by the fogged-up glass. She hesitated for a moment, her heart in her throat. He hadn't looked at her this way in a long time, not with the warmth and familiarity that had once been there. No, there was a distance between them, a quiet space that neither of them knew how to bridge. She took a deep breath and pushed open the door, the bell chiming softly above her head. As she stepped inside, the warmth of the cafe enveloped her, but it did little to ease the chill in her bones. She glanced around the room for a moment, trying to steady her nerves, before her eyes landed on Jones. He was staring at his hands, his posture stiff as if he were trying to prepare himself for what was to come. Emma's heart clenched at the sight of him. She had always been able to read him so easily, to understand the emotions behind his words. But now, everything felt clouded. She didn't know how to read him anymore. She walked over to the table and took a seat across from him. There was an awkward silence that stretched between them, a silence that neither of them seemed willing to break. The hum of the cafe and the soft clink of coffee cups were the only sounds that filled the space. Emma could feel the weight of their history pressing down on them both, and for the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure what to say. Finally, Jones looked up at her, his eyes dark and searching. Emma, I don't know how we got here, but I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when it's not. She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know how we got here either. I don't know how we ended up so far apart. Jones's fingers tightened around his cup, his jaw clenching slightly. I tried, Emma. I really did. But somewhere along the way, I think I lost you. Her heart squeezed painfully. You didn't lose me, Jones. I never left. I couldn't find my way back to you. The words hung in the air, heavy with truth, and Emma found herself fighting back tears. She hadn't realized how much she had missed him, how much she had longed for him to fight for her. But it wasn't just about that anymore. It was about the person she had become, the one who was so tangled in the past that she couldn't see a way forward. Jones looked at her, his expression softening. I don't know if we can fix this. I don't know if we can go back to the way things were, but I don't want to give up on us. I can't. Not yet. Emma closed her eyes, trying to keep herself together. She had told herself that she had made peace with their separation, that it was for the best. But hearing him say those words stirred something deep inside her. She wasn't sure if she was ready to hear it, to face the possibility of going back to something that had once made her feel whole. But the idea of giving up entirely, of letting go, was just as terrifying. I don't want to give up on us either, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft hum of the cafe. But I don't know if I can go back to who I was before. Jones reached across the table, his hand resting gently over hers. His touch sent a warmth through her that she hadn't felt in so long, a warmth that felt both comforting and painful at the same time. Then let's not try to go back, he said, his voice firm but tender. Let's try to move forward, together. The simplicity of his words hit her like a wave. Emma wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that they could rebuild something from the broken pieces of their past, but she also knew that moving forward wasn't as easy as it sounded. She had so much to unravel, so many layers of herself that she had buried in the past, and there was still the question of Henry, of the life they had shared, and the love that had once seemed so certain. I don't know if I can do this, Jones, Emma admitted, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can move forward with you when I'm still so lost in the past. Jones's eyes softened, and he leaned forward slightly, his voice earnest. I don't expect you to have all the answers. I don't even expect you to have the same feelings you had before. But I need you to give us a chance, a real chance. No more running, no more pretending. Emma closed her eyes, her heart aching with the weight of his words. She had been running for so long, hiding behind the walls she had built around herself. But maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to face the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. I can't promise you everything. I can't promise that it will be easy, but I'm willing to try, for us. A flicker of hope passed through Jones's eyes, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade away in the rain outside. The uncertainty, the doubts, they all became background noise as they sat there, locked in a silent understanding. There was still so much they didn't know. But at that moment, Emma realized something. No matter how broken they were, no matter how lost they seemed, they still had each other, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start rebuilding. The waiter arrived to take their order, but Emma didn't hear him. She was too lost in the quiet connection that had formed between them, the fragile threads of their relationship still hanging in the balance. I'll take 2 coffees, Jones said, his voice steady. The waiter nodded and walked away, but Emma didn't move. She just sat there, staring at him, knowing that this wasn't the end of their story, but only the beginning of something new. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope.